Hi, this is Ali. Welcome to my channel. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you have subscribed, thank you very much. And if you haven't, then please subscribe. And if you hit the bell icon, you'll be notified when I put out my next video. In the description below is my email address. So if you'd like to email me a question, you can email me a question there. Today, I'm going to talk about our egos and how our egos affect us when we're manifesting. So our ego is basically a self-generated identity. Now, these identities we've generated as we've grown up. So from being babies to small children, growing up, and then through our adult life, we've just added more data from things that have happened to us, from experiences, and this is basically creating our ego. Now, the ego can work against us. It doesn't have to work against us, but it does. If we have negative mindsets going on, and if we've had any negativity in our childhood or as we're growing up, anything we've been taught as we're growing up that's negative, in certain relationships that we could have had, we can get negativity from those. Now, these negativities create patterns, and we all keep doing the same patterns that we used to doing. We just get into habits. All patterns is just a habit that we've got into. So we've done something, it's become a habit. We then, because we're doing this, we then attract more of like to us, because law of attraction says we attract more. And we end up then in the same patterns, and these patterns get bigger and bigger. And what the ego does is our ego likes the comfiness of those patterns because that's what it's used to. So when we want to try and break away from these patterns and try and do something new, which if you're watching any of this is what you're trying to do because you want to improve your life. So by trying to improve your life, your ego is going to try and pull you back because it wants you back where it's safe. It wants you back in the old patterns. It doesn't want these new ones because it doesn't understand the new ones. It doesn't like the feeling of the new ones. It likes the feeling of knowing that you are kept where you are. It likes you to be, it's almost that it likes you to be in a negative emotion because that's what it's been used to. Because you've been taught these different beliefs and different negativities that have come into your life as you're growing up, it wants to keep you in this place. It likes to keep you where it feels safe. It's all about how it feels. So what we have to start doing, because obviously we can't be fighting against our ego all the time, what we have to start doing is we need to change our patterns and we need to put in new patterns. And once we start to put new patterns into our life, our ego will then realise that actually, oh, this is who we really are now. And it will start to drop the connection to the old pattern. So it will then stop trying to pull us back into the old patterns. So very often, if you're feeling negative about something, if you're feeling anxious or fearful, that is your ego that is pulling you back into that negative side because it's panicking. It's saying, no, hang on, you're trying something new. This is not what we do. We haven't done this before. Get back here. And it literally is almost like your keeper, and it's trying to keep you safe. And like I say, it's not doing it because it's meaning to harm you, and it's not harming you in any way, but it's trying for its own what it knows it needs to feel safe, so it's trying to get you back into these old patterns. So we really need to start changing our patterns. Now, the way we start changing patterns is we have to first of all realize what our patterns are. So we can all have negative patterns in different areas. We can have all over the place, and some larger than others. Very often there's a lot of people that can have negative patterns towards money. That was probably that and relationships are probably the two most common, and I would imagine money probably the most common one. Because of how we were brought up as children, we would have been told things like money doesn't grow on trees, oh, you can't just have money, no, you can't have that because we haven't got enough money. And so what we're learning is that actually money stops us from having what we want rather than the good side of money. So we're actually learning a negative story about money, and without us knowing it, we take that story subconsciously into our lives. So when we're trying to manifest money, we've got these blocks that have come from these patterns. So we're trying our hardest to manifest money, but in our subconscious, we're saying to ourselves, yeah, but it can't just come. Money can't grow on trees. We can't just come into money. We have to work hard for money. So as much as we're trying to manifest this money appearing, or the pathway to the money that we want, we've then got this subconscious negative belief which is saying, no, you can't just have that. So we're trying to tell ourselves we can just have that, and our ego is pulling us back, and we're saying, no, you can't. So that's deeply rooted, because if you think about how many years you've probably heard those stories for as a child, and then how many years you've actually kept them in there without even realising, they're quite deep rooted thoughts that we've got, and blocks that we've got about money. So we can change this. This is quite easy to change. What we need to do is, like I say, you need to acknowledge what patterns are yours. So, when things start cropping up, you will start to notice what patterns are yours. Just jot things down. When you meditate, very often, I find this happens to me a lot. Whenever I meditate, and very often something will just come into my awareness, and it will be something that I have no idea that was going to come in, and it will be 9 times out of 10 to show me what patterns I've got that I've still haven't shifted. And so what I do is, when I come out of meditation, I just write it down. And then very often, if I go back into meditating on another day or later that day, I can sometimes get more info on that because it's in there. So I can get more, I can often go back into, where did this pattern come from? So it tells me what the pattern is, and then I can go back into, where did this come from? And it, like I say, it's usually for me stems back into childhood, into negative things that were said as a child. So the first thing you want to do is, you want to figure out what your patterns are, what your old patterns are that you really, really need to change. And then once you've figured out what your old patterns are, then you just basically, when you get into the point where you're going to play these patterns out, you stop yourself. You say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do the exact opposite. Now, it's going to feel strange, and it's going to feel horrible, and it could feel scary. It's going to feel all those things. It's going to feel nasty, because your ego's pulling you into that pattern. Your ego wants you in that pattern because it feels safe, okay? But you know that is a bad pattern, so it doesn't matter what your ego feels. You are taking control of this, okay? So you are going to pull yourself opposite, all right? Doesn't matter how it feels, doesn't matter how bad it makes you feel, how upset it makes you feel, how worried and anxious, it's going to be fine, okay? It's going to be totally fine, but you need to pull yourself away from that pattern and do the absolute opposite. Once you do the absolute opposite, the first time you do that, that will be the hardest pull, because once you've done that first pull, every pull after that will get easier. And once you've done that first one, you will then find again, once you go back into that same space, and you get the pull again back to an old pattern regarding something, again, you do exactly the same. And each time you do this, what you are doing is, you are then teaching yourself new patterns. You're teaching your subconscious your new patterns. And once you teach your new patterns, your ego then clings to those patterns, because the ego wants to cling to the patterns you've got because it feels safe. It starts to then cling to your new patterns, and that's when then your ego will start to work with you. Because you're rebooting everything, you're reteaching your subconscious, you're reteaching your patterns, you're reteaching everything. So you are breaking down all of the negativity that you've acquired throughout your life. And we can acquire it without even knowing some of it. I mean, there's some things you might look into and think, yeah, I know that's a pattern, but I'm really not sure where that came from. And if that's the case, it doesn't matter where it came from, but your acknowledgement that that is a pattern is what it really is about. And then, like I say, you just make sure that each time you break those patterns. And once you start doing that, each time you do it, it will start to feel easier. Okay, it's like I say, it's going to feel bad to start off with, but once you start doing it, it will start to feel easier and easier and easier. And then you will teach your ego these new patterns. It will take them on. And so then once you start doing these patterns, it will start to feel great, because you're not fighting against yourself then. You're not fighting against the ego. The ego's then working with you. And that's where we want to be, because once you can get yourself and your ego working together, then your manifestations are going to come quicker, because you haven't got anything pulling you to a negative belief and pulling you away from what you truly want and truly know that you are. So it's all about just this reprogramming of your brain and the whole patterns, just sussing out what your patterns are, and then really, really being very mindful, of each time they come up. Pull yourself away, pull yourself back, do the exact opposite that you would always do every single time, and you will break those patterns. And you'll find that it doesn't take a long time to do it. It doesn't take a long time at all to do it. Once you start doing this, you really, really, really get into a good flow. And again, because law of attraction gives you more of what you're putting out there, you're putting out the more positive because you're pulling away from these old negative patterns. So it's actually stopping them from coming so much because you're not asking for them. It doesn't think you want them. It realizes you want the more positive stuff. So it's actually that starts to work with you, and everything then will start to work together, and you will find that things then start to come a lot easier, and you will feel so much better in yourself because you won't have a lot of the negative feelings, you know, because you won't be going into these old patterns that haven't served you. None of these patterns have served you. They are just habits. They're literally just habits that we've taken along with us, and they're not even our habits. That's the worst thing, is the fact that they're actually habits that we've taken on from our parents and from other people that have influenced us in our lives. So they're not even our patterns, they're just everybody else's. So we're really, really getting back to who we are and our own nice patterns and positive patterns, and, you know, really, really getting back to who we actually are, and not the negative people that we feel like we are. I hope that helps you. And like I say, if you want any more information, or if you want me to do a video about a question, then feel free to email me. Thank you very much for watching.